Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow history lovers of all ages. Welcome to my library. I'm Michael C. Hardy. This is Sunday Night History Chat. I know we've been gone for the past couple of weeks, or I've not actually been gone. I've been busy working on a project the past couple of weeks. But we're back this evening and we're going to jump into a little history. I am flying alone this evening. Miss Elizabeth and Isabella are at her mom and dad's, and hopefully they'll pop on and join us here, or at least one of them will pop on and join us here in a few minutes. Had a great time in Kingsport, Tennessee on Tuesday night last week. Great crowd, great questions. It was great seeing some folks we've not seen in a while. And then yesterday, I was at the Avery County Heritage Festival, probably the closest event to me that I do every year. It's like 5 miles. But there was a ton of people. And if you came by my table and said good evening and hi, thank you so much for doing that. We sold a lot of books and shared a lot of history. And I've got letters to go through, maybe some from the 1860s. I'm not even dived into that yet. And just a lot of cool conversations. It's great when people come ask you questions. It's great when people flag you down and have resources and things. So that went really, really good. And a great day. I will be on the road this Tuesday evening, another local event. I will be speaking at the Center for Pioneer Life near Burnsville, North Carolina. We'll be talking all kinds of history over there. And then next week on Thursday, I will be speaking to the UDC in Raleigh, North Carolina. So if you're out and about any of those places, please come and join me and let's sit down and let's chat and see what kind of history we can come up with. I want to say good evening to everyone. I hope your summer is going really well. It's kind of warm here for us in the mountains of Western North Carolina. I know it's a lot warmer wherever you are, but for us, anytime it hits 80 degrees, it's pretty warm. But that's okay. We'll get through it. We're going to jump into our discussion this evening. It is entitled Harvard University's Boys in Gray. And a lot of times when we think about the war, we think North versus South. We think about blue versus gray. And in a lot of ways, the North is the North and the South. We are separated ideologically and other ways, and it's it's true. All of that is true, but at the same time, there's this huge connect between the North and the South. Cotton growers in the South. That cotton went to textile mills in New England. Wheat and rye and hogs grown in the Ohio River Valley floated down the Mississippi River en route to plantations to feed workers. Farm machinery was manufactured up north. I mean, you could find it in mills in the South and cotton gins in places. And so there's this connect between these various areas. This even holds true for education. For the elite, attending a college in the North a lot of times was seen as a better education than Southern colleges, even though we've got Southern colleges like the University of Alabama and William and Mary and the University of Virginia. If you really wanted to get ahead, you went up north to one of these schools. Harvard University was founded in 1836. It is the oldest university in the country. There are a lot of famous graduates that went to the Harvard University both before the war and after the war. And we're talking about Supreme Court justices and presidents of the United States. Revolutionary War Major General Artemus Ward went there, graduated from there. The minister Cotton Mather went to Harvard University. We could talk about all of these other schools, but we're just going to focus on Harvard. And we're just going to focus on a handful of graduates. I found 357 Southerners who actually attended or graduated from Harvard prior to the war. 16, or let's just go back. Of that number, of that 357 men from the South who graduated or attended Harvard, 64 were killed in action, 12 died of disease, 16 of them became generals. We're going to look at 8 of those generals for the next few minutes and talk a little bit about their lives and what became of them, some of them after the war. First one we're going to talk about this evening is John Eccles. Okay. We're going to talk about John Eccles for a few minutes. He was class of 1834. He went to law school there. Eccles was born in Virginia. He served as the Commonwealth's attorney. He served in the House of Commons prior to the war, and he was also a member of the Virginia Secession Convention. So he's a graduate of Harvard Law School. At the First Battle of Manassas, he commanded a regiment under Stonewall Jackson. His action at Kernstown, in which he was wounded, led to his promotion to brigadier general. He commanded the Department of Southwest Virginia for a time until ill health forced his resignation. And he didn't resign from the Army. He just resigned from, pretty much active field command there for a while. Later, he was on a court of inquiry regarding the surrender of Vicksburg. He did return to active duty, commanded a brigade in the Army of Western Virginia. In August of 1864, he assumed command of the District of Southwest Virginia, and he was replaced by Jubal Early on March 30th, 1865. And it's at that point that Eccles actually takes a group of men and heads toward Lee's army, which will surrender at Appomattox before he actually gets there. After the war ends, Eccles was president of a bank, organized a railroad, was on the board of visitors for Washington and Lee College and the Virginia Military Institute, and he ran quite a few other businesses. I guess I don't think he practiced law, even though he graduated from the law school after the war was over. Maybe he did, but it definitely had an impact on his later career. Probably unlikely, this is not unlikely, the highest ranking Confederate general to serve is Richard Taylor. And Taylor was the class of 1845. He was born in Kentucky. He was the son of Zachary Taylor. He had a huge plantation and over 200 slaves. And that's primarily what he did prior to the war, but he did serve in the Louisiana Senate. That's where his property was in Louisiana. And these are short bios. Even though a lot of these people do not have biographies, Richard Taylor actually does have one. He was, at the start of the war, was elected colonel of the 9th Louisiana Infantry. In September of 1861, he was promoted to brigadier general. Fought in Virginia under Jackson, was promoted to major general in June of 1862. He then transferred back to Louisiana, where he feuded a lot with E. Kirby Smith. Taylor would go on to fight at Fort Bisland, Fort Franklin, Red River Valley, Mansfield, Pleasant Hill, and then he was appointed commander of the Department of Alabama, Mississippi, and East Louisiana. At the same time, he was promoted lieutenant general. After the war, Taylor worked on rebuilding his plantations, and he worked a lot against radical Republicans and Reconstruction. So that is Richard Taylor. I'm going to talk next about Jason thinks I got the wrong picture. Well, now we're going the wrong way. And you may be right. A lot of times that's a challenge. Let's go back and get reset here. I think that is Joseph Wheeler. I should double check that. Oh, well, we'll check that again here in the near future. We're going to move on. Can't believe everything you find on the internet, right, friends? Two, John R. Cook. Might help if I hit the share screen button again. So John R. Cook is class of 1851. He was actually a civil engineer for a while. He was born in Missouri, and he is actually the son of Philip St. George Cook. So that's a whole fascinating story. You talk about brother versus brother or family versus family. That's all over that story. After he graduated from Harvard with his degree in civil engineering, he actually finagled a way into the military, and he served in New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas. Once the war began, he served as a staff officer, commanded an artillery battery, and was colonel of the 27th North Carolina. He was promoted to brigadier general in November of 1862, and it's his North Carolina brigade that fought behind the stone wall there at Marie's Heights at Fredericksburg. He was wounded 7 times during the war, including at Bristow Station in the Wilderness. After the war is over, he goes to Richmond, Virginia. He founds the Confederate Soldiers Home Number 1. He is commander of the first UCV camp, becomes a UCV camp there in Richmond, Virginia. We are going to look at Bradley Johnson next. Bradley T. Johnson, class of 1852 there at Harvard Law School. He was born in Maryland. He was the state's attorney general. Once the war comes, he organizes a company of men that serve in the 1st Maryland. They fight at the Battle of First Manassas. He's in various campaigns through 1862. And then Stonewall Jackson recommends him for promotion to brigadier general. And that doesn't really happen for 2 years or a year and a half. Johnson, there's this whole thing with conscription and the Maryland troops. And a lot of times, if you were a commander if you were from Virginia, you got a brigade of Virginians. If you were from Alabama, you got a brigade of Alabamians. That's not always true, but it does work that way a lot of times. And since there was not really another brigade of Maryland troops that Johnson could command, he really didn't have a command. And so he does not become a brigadier general until June of 1864. And then for what I was reading, he takes command of Grumble Jones's brigade in Early's advance on Washington, D.C. In November of 1864, Johnson was assigned as commander of Salisbury Prison in Salisbury, North Carolina. After the war is over, he served in the Virginia Senate, and he practices law in Virginia before he returns to Maryland, where he lives out the rest of his days. So here we have a states' rights Gist. What a name. He was class of 1852 at Harvard Law School. He was born in South Carolina. He practiced law and served in the militia prior to the war. At the Battle of First Manassas, he served as an aide-de-camp to Barnard B. And his promotion to brigadier general came in March of 1862. He spends most of his time, or a lot of his time, in South Carolina at James Island. He's there until May of 1863 when he is sent to Mississippi. And then he's with the Army of Tennessee fighting at Chickamauga, Chattanooga, and the battles for Atlanta. He's at the Battle of Franklin, where he is killed during that fight. So here we have Benjamin Hardin Helm. Fantastic story. He is class of 1854 at Harvard Law School. He is a brother-in-law to Abraham Lincoln. He goes to West Point first and graduates from West Point, and then after a year or so, he resigns his commission and goes to Harvard to study law. He also served in the Kentucky House. He is one of Kentucky's state lawyers, the districts. He's one of the Commonwealth's lawyers for one of those districts. Lincoln actually offered him a job as an Army paymaster, and Helm turned it down and instead started raising Confederate cavalry companies. In March of 1862, he was promoted to brigadier general. He commanded an infantry brigade under John C. Breckinridge. He was wounded, seriously wounded, down toward Baton Rouge when his horse fell on him and crushed his pelvic bone. He eventually does make it back with the army in Mississippi, and then they get transferred with that concentration of troops that Bragg is doing, and Helm is mortally wounded at Chickamauga in September of 1863. John S. Marmaduke is another one on the list, and we're only looking at 8 of the 16 this evening. You'll be able to check out the others in a future post on the Looking for the Confederate War blog. Marmaduke is class of 1854. He was born in Missouri. He attended Yale, then he went to Harvard, and then he got accepted into West Point. He didn't actually graduate from Harvard. He was just working his way to West Point. After commissioning, he served in the West. After Lincoln's call for troops, Marmaduke resigns from the Army, joins the state forces in Missouri. He was commissioned colonel, but he resigned and went to Richmond, where he joined the Confederate Army. So his commission as a colonel was with Missouri state forces. So he goes to Richmond. He joins the Confederate Army. He served on William J. Hardee's staff, and then is promoted lieutenant colonel of the 1st Arkansas Infantry Battalion. And they kind of reorganize, and he becomes colonel of the 3rd Confederate Infantry. Marmaduke fought at Shiloh, Corinth, Tupelo, Prairie Grove. His promotion to brigadier general came in November of 1862. He participated in a lot of the battles in Arkansas and Missouri. He even fought a duel with Brigadier General L. Marsh Walker. Walker is mortally wounded. Marmaduke is arrested, but then he is released really soon. He was captured late in the war and imprisoned at Fort Warren. After the war, he is an insurance agent. He is an editor, newspaper editor, and he is the governor of Missouri, and he dies while serving as governor of Missouri. And then our last general we're going to look at this evening might, maybe, just maybe, be most famous on the list, or maybe the most well-known on the list. This is Major General William Henry Fitzhugh Lee. He started out at Harvard. He was supposed to be a part of the class of 1858, but he got he did transfer, but he went from Harvard to West Point to the United States Military Academy, and he graduates from the United States Military Academy. He serves in the Utah War against the Mormons, but then resigns from the U.S. Army just prior to the war, manages family property. When the war came, he served in various cavalry commands before being appointed lieutenant colonel of the 9th Virginia Cavalry. Both his father, Robert E. Lee, and Jeb Stuart recommended Lee for promotion, which came in November of 1862. It is Lee here, not to be confused with Fitzhugh Lee. It is Lee, William Henry Fitzhugh Lee, who's out there chasing Stoneman around during the Chancellorsville campaign. And at Brandy Station, Lee here is wounded in the thigh, and he goes home to recover, and he is captured by a federal raiding party while recovering and was not exchanged until May of 1864. Lee was promoted to Major General in April of 1864. When Wade Hampton is sent to South Carolina, Lee commands the cavalry on the south side of the James River. After the war is over, he served in the state Senate and the U.S. House. So those are our 8 that we're going to look at this evening. There are 8 more that I have worked on today, that I'll be making a blog post about here in the very near future. And I encourage you to check that out. I'll post a link when we get those up and down. It is amazing. I was sitting here and I took most of my notes from William C. Davis's volumes on the Confederate general. I think there are 5 volumes total. It is amazing some of these stories that have not been fleshed out into full biographies. Yes, there was one on Richard Taylor and some of these other folks, but boy, there's a lot of fascinating stories right there that we need to go through and really need to work more on doing. So just fascinating people. These folks from Harvard. Jason, you're right. When Lee's wife is sick, he tries to get the federal government to parole him long enough so he can go be with his sick wife, and that does not happen. They don't do it, and she dies without him being there at her bedside. So tons of fascinating stories. If you read a lot about the war and read deeply or read widely, the 2 different things, you'll discover that there are all kinds of amazing stories out there. And thank you for joining me this evening and allowing me to tell you just a few of these stories out there as we chat. So we're going to go back through and look through these notes and see what else is going on. And I'll go ahead and say good evening to everybody like Adam and that I didn't get earlier, and David over in East Tennessee. Yeah, I have David Pope. I have Cisco's biography on Gist, but I've never actually read it. It's on the shelf over there on the opposite side of the room. Robert Carswell mentions how CBS Sunday morning, did a segment on National History Day in Maryland, and they did. It's 4.5 minutes long. You can actually see me in that video. I was sitting there with other parts of the North Carolina delegation. They had made me and Elizabeth chaperones for the Ken Burns luncheon or lunchtime speech. We thought it was a luncheon. It's a good thing we didn't take food in there because it was not a food luncheon. But yeah, it was a great story. National History Day is an awesome competition, and it's nice that they're getting a little press. Yep, that's what's going on with me. Y'all drop questions or comments in the box down there, and we'll see what we can do with those for the next few minutes. And then I'm going to sign off and finish up my notes for this blog post. And then it's back to the aviation book. I had to ask for another extension this morning. It was originally due at the end of May. And I said I would have it done at the end of June. And now I'm going to say the end of July. I have wrote 11,000 words since we got back from Maryland, but I need another 6,000 or 7,000 words to get it done. So that's going to be the majority of this week's work right here in the Michael C. Hardy Memorial Library, trying to knock that out. So if you got any more thoughts or questions, please drop a comment in the box and we will see what we can do. Otherwise, Jason's currently reading the Bean book on Sandy Pendleton. I'm actually reading that new book I'm almost done, about another 30 pages on the Confederate Navy's medical department. And I'm reading it for review for Emerging Civil War. And it's not a bad book. It fills in a lot of holes. Some chapters are more exciting than others. Those first 2 chapters where they talk about different pay grades and how the organizational structure of all that worked. I don't know if I'd have put that up front, but overall, it's a really good book. Just his first 2 chapters are a little technical. That's the word for it. They're a little technical. So we should have that done and written here in the very near future. Um, Well, David, that's an awesome question. The Valley Cavalry, in a lot of instances, are fighting a traditional cavalry force. So the war in the East is not like the war in the West. Um, it's really not. It's two different things. Um, Robert says that Richard Taylor was one of the better generals in the Deep South. I would probably agree with that after reading, working through, and I have that biography. I don't know if I've ever read that one or not. Some of these books I've had for a long time, and so much of my reading is tied to what I'm actually working on, or what I'm reviewing for um, emerging Civil War or Confederate veteran or some other place. In fact, I have a book over here that is I should have already read for review, but we're going to get to it really soon. It's actually the new Ross Massey History of Loring's Division. It's not a small book. Um, Actually, it's not real big. It actually is big, but we're going to be tackling that book here in the very near future. I actually read a bio for review on W.W. Loring, old One Wing, years ago. I think it came out in Blue and Gray magazine years ago. So I have a little background with that. We'll have to see. Adam is reading Harsh's Confederate Tide Rising. That is one of my favorite books. It really is. I love the way it's actually a 3-volume set, but I love the way uh, the detail for the Maryland campaign in that book is phenomenal. So really good stuff. Really good stuff. Any other thoughts or questions? Drop them in there. We'll take a stab at them. Maybe I can recommend something for you to read. But yeah, that's what's going on here in the library. It's just me and the cats. Jason, we probably have the same book on Loring because I'm pretty sure there's only one of them. I think it was a McFarland book, but it's been a long time. Been several years since I read that as well. But we'll see what we remember when we jump into this next text here in the near future. Any more comments? Leave them in the box. Like I said earlier, you can catch me at the Center for Pioneer Life this Tuesday evening at 5:30, and I will be speaking at the UDC in Raleigh next week. And yeah, getting around a little bit. So Adam wants to know, is Hartwick's To Antietam Creek a good read? I thought it was a great read, and I have his second volume. Of course, Hartwick is writing a whole history of the war. Harsh is just looking at the Confederate side of that campaign. I'm sorry, Hartwick is looking at just the whole campaign in 2 volumes, and I have the second volume. I dread the thought of this place, but I don't know when I'm going to get to that one. But Harsh just looks at the Confederate campaign, and it's really good. Um, really good. Good stuff. So I enjoyed Hartwick's book. I really did. Even though he and I disagree in the primary campaign, the Battle of Sharpsburg, not Sharpsburg. Never mind. Scratch that. Different battle. I have a couple of Wade Hampton bios over there someplace. One of my favorite research interests, John B. Palmer, actually kind of took care of Hampton after the war because Hampton was broke financially. And Palmer, who was a railroad president, would hang out with him, take him on hunting trips. They went to Florida sometimes. Palmer's a fascinating story as well. All right, folks, any other questions? And I'm going to sign off. Jason said he really likes the Carmen book. We could do a whole program, we might in the future, just on books dealing with the Maryland campaign. And Carmen's really good. You know, Carmen is amazing, the amount of people that he talked to, both Confederate and Union, as he is putting his history of the campaign together. And I'm glad that it got published, because for the longest time it was inaccessible unless you went to Library of Congress or I think the New York Public Library. And Savas Beatty is supposed to be publishing the Carmen Papers. And there's probably going to be all kinds of gems in that as well that we can research. But Carmen communicated with folks like James H. Lane about their involvement in the battle, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there on that. And I'm looking forward to the papers. That will be, I'll have to make more room on the shelf over there for that, because, you know, we've got Harsh's series, we've got the Carmen series, we've got Hartwick's 2 volumes, John Michael Priest's 2 books. But we'll save that for discussion for another time. All right, folks, I think that's going to do it for me. Unless I see something pop up really soon, I'm going to sign off here and finish this blog post and maybe work a little bit on that aviation book and see if we can't get that thing knocked out. Jason, I have one book on Monocacy, but I can't remember which one that it is. Maybe it's the only book on Monocacy. I think Savas did a new book on Monocacy, but I don't remember. All right, folks, I'm going to sign off from here. Y'all have a fantastic evening. Remember to keep researching, keep sharing that history, whether it be through writing or through living history events or whatever. Please just keep sharing that history. And I look so much forward to getting together with you, Lord willing, next Sunday night. And maybe I'll have an aviation manuscript done. Until then, thank you so much for joining me here in my library, and God bless.